Imagine standing in a dense jungle, the air heavy with humidity and buzzing with unseen life. Through the vines and strangler figs, a massive stone pyramid looms, weathered by centuries, but still defiant. It doesn't just tower above the trees, it towers above time. You've heard of the Romans, the Greeks, the pharaohs of Egypt, but deep in the emerald belly of Central America, another civilization rose, just as brilliant, just as brutal. The Maya. They weren't a lost people. They were the timekeepers of the ancient world. Mathematicians, architects, astronomers, and, yes, blood sacrificers. They charted Venus with NASA-like precision, built cities without metal tools, and they believed, truly believed, that human blood kept the universe spinning. And here's the wild part. Scientists today are still trying to figure out how they did what they did. This story isn't just history. It's an ancient code still being cracked. A forgotten superpower, rediscovered ruin by ruin, glyph by glyph. So how did it begin? How did the Maya emerge from jungle mist into mathematical glory? Who taught them the secrets of time and sacrifice? And most importantly, why did they disappear? Let's step back 2,000 years before Christ, to a time when myth and history weren't separate, but the same thing. Welcome to our channel. If you are interested in ancient stories, go ahead, press red subscribe button and turn on notifications for more updates. The story of the Maya doesn't start in a temple. It starts in the dirt. Long before Chichen Itza or Tikal rose above the canopy, scattered farming villages dotted the Guatemalan highlands and the Yucatan Peninsula. Around 2000 BCE, these early groups began cultivating maize, beans, squash, the sacred trinity of Mesoamerica. But these weren't just crops. In Mayan mythology, humans were made from corn. That's not metaphor. It's theology. According to the Popol Vuh, the ancient Mayan book of creation, the gods tried several times to create mankind. First from mud, then wood, but both failed. Finally, they shaped us from sacred maize, cornmeal and water, the lifeblood of Maya culture. Man is made of corn, the priest-shamans whispered. And to feed the gods, man must bleed. This fusion of agriculture and blood ritual laid the foundation for a culture obsessed with cycles of nature, time, death, and rebirth. By 1000 BCE, these early agrarian people began building ceremonial platforms and earthen pyramids. At sites like Cebal, archaeologists uncovered early plazas with altars, suggesting ritual activity long before the famed classical period. Dr. Takashi Inomata of the University of Arizona excavated Cebal and found monumental architecture 500 years earlier than expected. His team used LiDAR scanning, a remote sensing technology that shoots lasers through jungle canopy. What they found stunned the archaeological community. It wasn't just isolated development, Dr. Inomata explains. It shows a widespread and coordinated cultural explosion earlier than we thought. The Maya weren't copying the Olmec. They were evolving in tandem, or perhaps even influencing each other. And then came Nakbi. Nestled in the Petén Basin of northern Guatemala, Nakbi is one of the earliest true Maya cities. Around 800 BCE, stone structures began to rise. Massive platforms, plastered causeways, temples with stairways leading into the sky. Then came El Mirador, discovered in the 1930s but only recently understood thanks to LiDAR technology. El Mirador was a prehistoric megacity, built centuries before the Roman Empire. At its peak around 300 BCE, it may have housed over 100,000 people. It's the cradle of Mayan civilization, says Dr. Richard Hansen of Idaho State University, who's been excavating El Mirador for decades. The scale is staggering. We're talking pyramids bigger than the Egyptian ones, hidden under jungle for 2,000 years. One of those pyramids is La Danta, rising over 70 meters high, with a base wider than the Great Pyramid of Giza. Here, kings weren't just rulers. They were divine mediators, chosen by gods, reinforced by bloodlines, and worshipped in life and death. The Mayan word for king, Ajah, means both lord and son, a perfect symbol for a ruler who rises, shines, and eventually sets into the underworld. To understand the Maya, you must understand their worldview, a cosmos layered like an onion. There was the underworld, Xibalba, the earthly plane, and the sky realm where gods and stars danced across the night. Life was not linear. It was cyclical. The same souls reborn. The same wars fought under new moons. The same sacrifices offered, over and over. They worshipped gods like Itsamna, the creator deity, Chak, the storm god, Kawil, god of lightning and kingship, and the hero twins, divine brothers who battled death in the underworld. One of the most sacred myths, echoing through carvings and temples across the land. Their cities weren't random. They were cosmic blueprints, aligned with solstices, planets, and constellations. Archaeologists used solar simulation software to discover that buildings in Köpen and Uxmal were perfectly aligned to the equinox sunrise. It wasn't just architecture. It was ritual cosmology set in stone. By 250 CE, the Maya entered their classic period, the Golden Age. City-states like Tikal, Calakmul, Karakol, and Palenque rose to power, each with its own dynasty, nobility, army, and scribes. But make no mistake, this was not a unified empire. It was a fractured network of powerful rivals, bound by trade and torn by war. Jade, obsidian, cacao, feathers, limestone, they traded everything but peace. In 562 CE, Calakmul defeated Tikal, toppling its king and plunging it into a century-long darkness known as the hiatus period. But Tikal would rise again. Steely, those towering stone slabs etched with glyphs, tell stories of royal marriages, betrayals, child kings, and blood sacrifice ceremonies staged to mark eclipses or coronations. At Palenque, the great king Pakal the Great ruled for nearly 70 years. His tomb, unearthed in 1952, is one of the most significant archaeological finds in the Americas. The carving on his sarcophagus lid, some say it shows him ascending into the cosmos. Ancient astronaut theorists still cite it today. Scientists, however, know better. It's symbolic rebirth, grounded in Mayan theology. Modern archaeology is changing everything. Using LiDAR, researchers have uncovered over 60,000 previously unknown Mayan structures. From defensive walls to vast road systems, reservoirs, and entire cities hidden beneath centuries of jungle. It's like someone just turned on the lights, said Dr. Francisco Estradabelli of Tulane University. Digital mapping, isotope analysis of bones, laser scanning of inscriptions. It's all revealing a society far more complex, centralized, and scientifically advanced than once believed. And we're just scratching the surface. We now know where the Maya came from, how they built their world in harmony with the cosmos, and how they wove blood and maize into power. But to truly understand them, we need to understand how they saw time, because they didn't just track it. They believed it controlled everything. So how did the Mayan calendar work? Why did they predict the end of time in 2012? And how accurate, terrifyingly accurate, were they? Imagine carving calendars into stone so precise. They still align with solar eclipses thousands of years later. No computers, no telescopes, just sky, stone, and sacrifice. Long before atomic clocks, the Maya already had it figured out. They weren't just building pyramids. They were building time itself, weaving it into calendars, rituals, and the very design of their cities. If you think time is just a number ticking away on your smartphone, the Maya would disagree. For them, time had shape, rhythm, purpose. It was sacred, alive, and when disrupted, the cosmos could collapse. And that infamous prophecy, the so-called end of the world in 2012, we misunderstood it because we misunderstood them. To the Maya, time wasn't just linear. It was cyclical, a sacred loop of endings and rebirths. So what exactly was the Mayan calendar? How did it work? And why are scientists still in awe of how terrifyingly accurate it is? Let's decode the system and explore the mind of a civilization obsessed with time. The Maya didn't just have one calendar. They had three, all operating simultaneously like gears in a cosmic watch. 260 days, divided into 20 day names and 13 numbers, rotating together like a divine clock, used for divination, ceremony, and spiritual guidance. Why 260 days? Some theories suggest it mirrors the human gestation cycle, from conception to birth. Others link it to Venus's position in the sky, which the Maya watched obsessively. Keycap 2 Hab, the solar year, 365 days, just like ours, divided into 18 months of 20 days, plus a mysterious 5-day period called Wei-Eb, a spiritually dangerous time when the veil between worlds thinned. During Wei-Eb, people stayed indoors. No work, no travel. It was believed that spirits roamed freely, and fate hung in the balance. Keycap 3 The Long Count, the calendar of eras, tracks massive cycles of time across 5,125-year periods. Dates written as 5-part numbers like 13.0.0.0.0.0, which correspond to specific days since a mythological starting point. August 11th, 3114 BCE, our Gregorian calendar. This long count is what led to the now infamous date of December 21st, 2012, when the last cycle reset. But contrary to popular belief, the Maya never predicted an apocalypse. To them, it was just the end of one age and the beginning of another. It's like your car hitting 100,000 miles, says Dr. Anthony Avini, an archaeoastronomer from Colgate University. The odometer resets. The car doesn't explode. The Mayan view of time wasn't fear-based. It was transformational. The Maya were stargazers long before Galileo pointed a telescope to the sky. Using only the naked eye and observation towers, they tracked equinoxes and solstices, solar and lunar eclipses, planetary movements, especially Venus, which they saw as a celestial warlord. In Copan, Honduras, temples align perfectly with solar zeniths, when the sun is directly overhead. At Chichen Itza, during the equinox, a serpent-shaped shadow slithers down the pyramid staircase, representing the god Kukulkan returning to Earth. It's not coincidence. It's intentional architecture, aligned with celestial precision. In 2018, a team from the University of Colorado used high-resolution photogrammetry to analyze carvings at Zoltan, Guatemala. Inside a painted chamber, they found astronomical tables painted over 1,200 years ago, predicting lunar cycles and Venus transits with shocking accuracy. These weren't just priests. They were human calculators, working with 0, base, 20-number systems, and observational discipline rivaling today's data scientists. Without 0, you can't have calculus. You can't have computers. You can't even have the calendar on your wall. The concept of 0, a place holding nothing, was independently invented by the Maya around 350 CE, centuries before it appeared in India or the Middle East. They represented it with a shell glyph, symbolizing emptiness and potential. It allowed them to perform complex calculations, build accurate calendars, and maintain synchronized rituals across cities separated by hundreds of miles. It's a triumph of abstract thinking, says Dr. Mark Van Stone, Maya epigrapher and author. This wasn't primitive math. This was brilliance in sandals. In the Mayan world, when something happened was often more important than what happened. A war might wait for a day associated with death and fire. A king's coronation timed to a Venus rising. Human sacrifices aligned with eclipses, symbolizing the temporary death of the sun. Priests consulted codices, folded bark books filled with glyphs and astronomical data, to time rituals to cosmic harmony. Only a few of these codices survive today. The Dresden Codex, held in Germany, contains tables predicting solar eclipses over 800 years. Dr. Susan Milbreth, curator at the Florida Museum of Natural History, calls it a mathematical masterpiece and a ritual guidebook for a civilization in tune with the universe. In the early 2000s, New Age thinkers latched onto the date December 21, 2012, believing it marked doomsday, based on the Mayan long count. Movies were made. Survival bunkers stocked. Theories went viral. But archaeologists and epigraphers knew the truth. The calendar didn't end. It reset. It was never about destruction, says David Stewart, a leading Maya scholar at the University of Texas. It was about transition, a new Bacton, a new world phase. Indeed, some modern Maya communities celebrated the date as renewal, not ruin. Drums beat, prayers offered, fires lit at ancient sites. The real mystery isn't why the calendar ended, but how they knew so precisely when it would. With LiDAR, epigraphy software, and astronomical modeling, modern science is still catching up to what the Maya knew. It's like decoding a cosmic instruction manual, says Dr. Guillermo Bernal of UNAM, Mexico. The deeper we go, the more precise it gets. Archaeologists at San Bartolo uncovered murals showing day signs and ritual counts over 2,200 years old, suggesting the calendar system predates even the classical period. And in modern Mayan villages, the Tzolk'in calendar is still used for naming children, planning weddings, and performing healing ceremonies. The past didn't disappear. It's alive, ticking with every sacred day. They built cities aligned to the heavens, invented zero, predicted eclipses centuries in advance. But their greatest achievement, mastery of time, couldn't stop their own collapse. So what happened? Why did their great cities fall silent? Why were pyramids abandoned, steel snapped, palaces reclaimed by vines? Was it war, climate, or something more mysterious? We'll unravel that in the next section, because sometimes even the masters of time run out of it. Imagine trekking through a jungle so thick it muffles even your thoughts. You push past hanging vines and sun-dappled ferns, and suddenly, it appears, rising like a mountain built by ghosts. A limestone pyramid, towering over the forest. Ancient, weathered, and silent. But it's not abandoned. It's alive. In its stones are stories, battles, blood, gods. This is Tikal, one of hundreds of Maya cities. And it's just the beginning. Across what is now Guatemala, Belize, Mexico, and Honduras, the Maya constructed over 40 major city-states and hundreds of smaller ceremonial centers, each one an island of stone in a sea of jungle, built without wheels, without metal tools, and often without beasts of burden. But what they lacked in brute technology, they made up for in vision, in coordination, and in an understanding of cosmos, geometry, and power that defies modern logic. How did they do it? Why did these cities rise in such a hostile environment? And what did they leave behind? Let's explore three of the most extraordinary: Tikal, Palenque, and Chichen Itza. Each one a masterpiece. Each one a key to the mystery of Maya genius and downfall. Located deep in the lowlands of modern-day Guatemala, Tikal was not just a city. It was a metropolis, a superpower, and a symbol. At its height around 700 CE, Tikal boasted over 100,000 inhabitants, monumental temples towering 70 meters tall, massive reservoirs and causeways, a dynasty of kings that ruled for over 800 years. The heart of the city is the Great Plaza, flanked by Temple I, the Temple of the Great Jaguar, and Temple II, the Temple of the Masks. These weren't just structures, they were cosmic markers, aligned to the solstices and equinoxes. The pyramids weren't meant to just reach the sky. They were conduits to the heavens. When you stand at the top of Temple 4 and watch the sun rise through the morning mist, says Dr. Stephen Houston of Brown University, you realize this wasn't about power alone. It was about presence, about being seen by the gods. Tikal wasn't alone. For centuries, it clashed with its powerful rival, Calakmul, in a titanic Cold War of alliances, marriage diplomacy, and proxy battles. In 562 CE, Tikal suffered a catastrophic defeat. Its king killed, its monuments left silent for decades. But like Rome after the sack of the Gauls, Tikal came back. In the late 7th century, a boy named Jasa Chan Kawil I took the throne and rebuilt the city's power. His reign saw the construction of Temple I, where he was later buried, a tomb filled with jade masks, obsidian blades, and marine shells brought from both coasts. Tikal endured, and it remains one of the best-preserved cities ever uncovered. Yet it also poses a question. How could something so advanced be forgotten? Nestled in the Chiapas Mountains of modern-day Mexico, Palenque is smaller than Tikal, but in many ways, more mysterious. Why? Because here, in the Temple of the Inscriptions, archaeologists uncovered one of the most significant tombs in the history of the Americas. In 1952, Mexican archaeologist Alberto Ruz Luillier was excavating the temple when he discovered a sealed stone slab beneath the floor. It took 4 years to remove the rubble behind it. What he found changed Mayan archaeology forever. A hidden staircase, leading down to a royal tomb, untouched for over 1,200 years. Inside was King Pakal the Great, one of the most powerful Maya rulers. His jade funeral mask remains one of the most iconic artifacts ever discovered. The lid of his sarcophagus, often misinterpreted by ancient alien theorists, actually depicts Pakal descending into the underworld, surrounded by cosmological symbols of death, rebirth, and the sacred world tree. It's not a spaceship, says Dr. Guillermo Bernal. It's resurrection in stone. Palenque wasn't just about power, it was about narrative. Its temples are filled with historical glyphs, court scenes, and myths carved into limestone panels. And the city's architecture? Elegant, fluid, spiritual. The palace contains a 4-story observation tower, aqueducts carrying fresh water, reliefs showing kings communing with gods. Palenque is where Mayan politics, religion, and cosmology merge seamlessly into stone. It's not just a ruin, it's a story that never stopped speaking. Chichen Itza isn't just famous. It's iconic. Listed as one of the new 7 wonders of the world, it's the crown jewel of the northern Yucatan. But unlike Tikal or Palenque, Chichen Itza thrived after the Classic collapse. During the Terminal Classic and early post-Classic period, approximate 800 to 1100 CE, it became a cosmopolitan capital where Maya culture fused with Toltec influence from central Mexico. This stepped pyramid isn't just a tourist backdrop, it's a mathematical and astronomical masterpiece. 91 steps on each side plus 1 platform equals 365 total steps. During the spring and autumn equinox, the setting sun creates a serpent-like shadow that slithers down the stairs, representing Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. It's one of the most dramatic examples of sacred architecture interacting with celestial events. It's a building designed to communicate with the sky, says archaeoastronomer Dr. Ed Barnhart. And it works. Still, over 1,000 years later, the largest known in Mesoamerica, 168 meters long, whispering galleries where sound travels from one end to the other. Here, warriors played the Mesoamerican ballgame, a brutal, sacred ritual. The stakes? Life and death. Inscriptions suggest captains were sacrificed after key games, perhaps even willingly, as a passage to divine honor. This wasn't sport, says historian Dr. Rex Kuntz. It was theater, cosmology, a reenactment of myth. Near the temple lies the sacred cenote, a deep sinkhole once thought to be a gateway to the underworld. Divers in the 20th century recovered human remains, mostly adolescent males, gold, jade, pottery, offerings to gods. And yet, for all Chichen Itza's grandeur, it, too, was abandoned. Here's what blows modern engineers' minds. The Maya built these cities without iron, steel, or wheels. They quarried limestone blocks with obsidian and flint tools, transported them with sheer human labor, and aligned structures using solar tracking and horizon-based measurements. They engineered sophisticated aqueducts, rainwater collection systems, underground reservoirs, chultans, in arid areas. They also designed ventilation shafts, stabilized foundations, and built with plaster made from burned limestone. They were not limited by what they lacked, says MIT engineer Dr. Morgan Griggs. They innovated around it. Their construction wasn't trial and error. It was intentional and often predictive, designed to last. And for the most part, it has. We've seen the glory, Tikal's towering monuments, Palenque's tombs of kings, Chichen Itza's cosmic calendar in stone. But by the end of the first millennium, something changes. Cities are abandoned. Stele go silent. Royal tombs are sealed, never to be reopened. What caused this sudden decline? Was it war? Famine? Rebellion? Or was it something far more complex and far more chilling? In the next section, we'll explore the collapse of the classic Maya and what it might tell us about our own civilization today. Because the jungle doesn't just reclaim stone. It swallows memory, and sometimes, it warns the future. Step into the heart of the Mayan world, a place where time wasn't just tracked, it was worshipped, where gods weren't abstract concepts but living forces, and where blood, sweat, and sacrifice weren't just acts of devotion. They were currency to the divine. In the ancient Mayan belief system, life was a performance, and the gods were the ever-present audience. Archaeologists sifting through limestone temples in Palenque and Tikal have uncovered murals and glyphs that read like sacred stage directions. Each image etched in stone reveals a deeply interconnected cosmos. Gods of maize, of rain, of death, each controlling a thread of life. And in the center of it all, the Mayan king, not just a ruler, but an intermediary between this world and the next point. One of the most haunting rituals ever discovered took place inside a cave system in Belize, known as Acton Tunikil Muknal, the Cave of the Crystal Sepulchre. Deep inside this limestone labyrinth, researchers from the Belize Institute of Archaeology, led by Dr. Jamie Aw, uncovered skeletal remains of over a dozen people, many of them children. Their bones lie undisturbed for centuries, calcified by the dripping cave waters, shimmering as if frozen in time. Experts believe these were ritual sacrifices, offered to appease the rain god Chuk during devastating droughts. Imagine walking through that dark, humid cave with only your headlamp flickering. The air is thick, the stone is slick, and then, you see them, the Crystal Maiden, a teenage girl sacrificed nearly 1,000 years ago, her bones now glittering with calcite. It's haunting, it's holy, and it speaks volumes about a society willing to give everything for balance in the cosmos. The Mayan underworld, Xibalba, the place of fright, wasn't some vague myth. It had a literal geography. Caves were portals. Cenotes, those deep, water-filled sinkholes found across the Yucatan, were entrances to the underworld itself. In fact, in 2018, a team of National Geographic-funded divers led by Guillermo de Anda explored a vast cenote network beneath Chichen Itza and discovered human bones, jewelry, and even incense burners, proof of sacred offerings to unseen gods below. The deeper archaeologists dig, the more layered the picture becomes. For the Maya, gods didn't reside above. They dwelled below, within, and around. Life and death were a cycle, a conversation, and blood was the ink. And speaking of blood, ritual bloodletting wasn't rare. It was routine. Elite members of society, kings, queens, high priests, would pierce tongues, ears, even genitals to offer their lifeblood. The act wasn't just symbolic. It was believed to open a spiritual conduit, allowing the supplicant to receive visions, divine messages, and ancestral guidance. Glyphs found on the walls of Yaxchilan's Temple 23 depict Lady Zak, a powerful Mayan queen, pulling a thorn-lined rope through her tongue while entering a trance. From her blood, an ancestral warrior emerges in a vision, speaking to her from beyond. That's not myth. That's carved history. What's staggering is how consistent these beliefs remained across city-states separated by jungles and time. Despite linguistic differences, despite regional styles, the spiritual framework held fast. Why? Because it wasn't imposed from the top. It was woven into every birth, every death, every harvest, every war. So, the question becomes, how did such a spiritually charged society, one that saw time, space, and death as part of a unified cycle, begin to collapse? To understand that, we have to go back to the stones, to the temples, to the silent ruins abandoned in the jungle. Because sometimes, civilizations don't fall. They vanish. And sometimes, they leave behind a final message. It didn't happen in one night. There was no single explosion, no army that burned everything to the ground. The fall of the classic Maya wasn't an apocalypse. It was a slow unraveling. Like vines creeping over stone, the collapse crept in, until temples were silent, altars overgrown, and the jungle swallowed what was once a mighty empire. For centuries, the Maya had thrived. City-states like Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and Caracol competed in art, science, and architecture. But beneath the beauty, something was breaking. Start with the skies. Triering data from ancient pine forests, paired with lake sediment samples taken from reservoirs near Tikal, show clear signs of prolonged droughts between 800 and 900 AD. This wasn't just a dry season. This was a megadrought, spanning decades, turning lush fields to dust, rivers to veins of stone. The gods were silent, the rains stopped falling, and the very thing that made life possible, water, became a reason for war. Cities that once celebrated shared rituals turned against each other. Monument inscriptions during the 9th century show a sharp increase in warfare. Leaders were no longer erecting stelae to honor peaceful alliances. They were commemorating conquests, decapitations, and destruction. Inscriptions from Dos Pilas describe a civil war that tore the city apart. In Köpen, the last known stela, erected by ruler Yucatuk, speaks not of glory, but desperation, an attempt to reclaim divine favor through sacrifice and ceremony, even as his people starved. And then came the silence. One by one, the great cities stopped building. The carving stopped. The writing stopped. The priests and kings, the intermediaries with the gods, lost their power. The sacred ball courts were abandoned. Temples stood unfinished. And the jungle began its slow conquest, covering pyramids with vines, swallowing plazas, wrapping itself around the bones of a forgotten world. But here's the twist. The Maya didn't disappear. They adapted. The southern lowlands, the heart of classic Maya civilization, were largely abandoned. But the Maya people migrated north, to places like Uxmal and Chichen Itza. They shifted their beliefs, restructured their cities, and formed new alliances. The famous city of Mayapan rose in the post-classic era, proving that collapse wasn't extinction. It was transformation. Even so, what vanished was something profound. The golden thread of a spiritual, scientific, and artistic era that had reached impossible heights. The stars they mapped still shine. The temples still stand. But the civilization that built them left behind only whispers. Imagine walking through the ruins of Tikal today. The howler monkeys scream in the canopy above. The moss creeps across crumbling stairs. And for a moment you hear nothing but the wind. The same wind that once carried the voices of kings, the cries of sacrifices, the chants of priests. Now, it's only echoes. What caused this collapse? Drought, war, overpopulation, deforestation. Scholars still debate the exact weight of each factor, but most agree the fall wasn't one cause. It was a perfect storm, and in that storm, the Maya looked to the heavens, offered their blood, and hoped. But the rains never came. Beneath the thick canopy of the Yucatan and deep within the Guatemalan highlands, something waits. Not just stone, not just ruins, but memory. A language written in architecture. A worldview encoded in limestone. And when you stand before it, truly still, the silence begins to speak. This is where the mind of the Maya lives on. The ruins are not simply the debris of an old world. They are declarations of intention, belief, and genius. Each temple, pyramid, and palace was a calculated message to the gods, to the stars, to the generations yet to come. Let's begin with Tikal, one of the greatest of the classic Maya cities. Towering over the forest canopy, the temple of the great jaguar, Temple I, aligns precisely with celestial events. During solstices and equinoxes, sunlight moves across its steps in patterns that reflect the Maya calendar. But this wasn't by accident. It was a sacred dialogue between heaven and earth. A city planned as a cosmic map. Not far away is Köpen, in present-day Honduras. It's here that the famous hieroglyphic stairway rises, 63 steps carved with over 2,000 glyphs, the longest known Maya text in the world. It tells the history of kings, gods, and divine authority. But it also reveals something deeper, the Maya obsession with time, legacy, and the immortality of story. Palenque reveals the philosophical brilliance of Maya cosmology. The Temple of Inscriptions, the resting place of the mighty King Pakal, is more than a tomb. It's a portal. Its 9 levels mirror the 9 layers of Xibalba, the Maya underworld. A sacred path the soul must travel. The carvings don't just depict death. They teach how to transcend it. And then there's Chichen Itza, a later northern city that represents the Maya's resilience and reinvention. The Temple of Kukulkan, known today as El Castillo, is an architectural wonder. With 365 steps, one for each day of the year, and precise orientation that casts a serpent-like shadow during the equinox. It's a monument of astronomical precision and religious symbolism combined. These sites weren't just built to house humans. They were meant to harmonize them with the forces of nature and cosmos. Every layout, every angle, every relief was part of a sacred script. The ball courts, too, speak volumes. Far more than sport, the Maya ballgame was a cosmic ritual, a reenactment of the battle between light and dark, life and death. In some versions, the stakes were higher than pride. The losing team, or sometimes the winning one, might face sacrifice. But to the Maya, this wasn't cruel. It was divine, a blood offering to maintain balance in the universe. Even the residential compounds of nobles and artisans show an advanced understanding of acoustics, urban planning, and social order. Sacred cenotes, natural sinkholes, were used not just for water, but as portals to the underworld. Offerings, human remains, and jade artifacts have been found at their depths. In truth, the ruins are not ruined. They preserve more than they decay. They reveal a people who saw no separation between science and spirituality, between stone and soul. And what's most astounding, many of these cities remained hidden for centuries, covered by jungle, misinterpreted, or simply ignored. It wasn't until the 20th century that serious excavation and deciphering began to unlock their secrets. But even now, we've barely scratched the surface. Archaeologists using LiDAR, laser scanning from planes, have discovered massive hidden complexes, entire cities still buried beneath jungle canopy. The Maya world was even larger, even more connected, than we previously imagined. The question remains, what more will the stones tell us? Once we learn how to listen, imagine standing at the edge of a smoldering temple, where pages of sacred wisdom twist and curl into ash. Not just books, but entire worlds, burning. The Maya didn't collapse in silence. They were silenced. And this was not the end of their story. This was the theft of their voice. The Spanish arrived with steel, fire, and crosses. What they didn't understand, they feared. What they feared, they destroyed. In 1562, at the hands of Franciscan priest Diego de Landa, countless Maya codices, books made of bark paper and filled with hieroglyphs, astronomy, and rituals, were gathered and set ablaze in the town of Mani. He called them works of the devil, but they were works of science, art, and soul. Only 4 known Maya codices survived that purge: the Dresden, Madrid, Paris, and Grolier codices. Just 4 out of possibly hundreds. What knowledge did we lose? Maps of the stars? Medical cures? Histories never told? The silence left behind is louder than the flames that created it. But the Maya did not simply vanish under Spanish conquest. They resisted fiercely. In the highlands of Guatemala, the Quiche Maya left behind the Popol Vuh, a powerful mythological text passed down through oral tradition and later written in secret. It tells of hero twins, of gods and underworlds, and of creation born through struggle. The text isn't just myth, it's defiance, a memory that refused to die. In the Yucatan, rebellion burned for centuries. The caste war of Yucatan in the 19th century saw Maya communities rise up against colonial forces, fighting to reclaim their land and identity. Armed with machetes, muskets, and centuries of suppressed rage, they declared their own independent state, Chan Santa Cruz, and held it for decades. Even today, echoes of that resistance remain. The Maya languages, Yucatec, Quiche, Quechua, are still spoken by millions. Their spiritual practices endure. Their ceremonies still call the rains. Their ruins still breathe stories to those willing to listen. Yet the scars are deep. Colonialism wasn't just conquest. It was erasure. A war not just on people, but on memory. And yet, the Maya remembered. Through weaving patterns passed from grandmother to granddaughter. Through whispered prayers in sacred caves. Through the rebuilding of temples stone by stone, story by story, they endured. What the conquistadors could not understand, and never could destroy, was that the Maya legacy isn't trapped in the past. It adapts. It survives. And so, the fall of the Maya was never really a fall. It was a fracture, one that has healed in secret places, in quiet voices, in sacred ink and firelight. Now, the world is listening again. Imagine standing before the temple of the great jaguar in Tikal, the rising sun casting golden rays across stone steps carved 1,000 years before your birth. You're not just witnessing history, you're standing in the shadow of an intelligence that once mapped the stars, healed with jungle medicine, and ruled with a calendar more precise than what we use today. The Maya are not relics. They're not gone. Their spirit breathes in the forests of Chiapas, in the laughter of Yucatec-speaking children, in the mathematical symmetry of your calendar app. Yes, really, because long before smartphones and satellites, the Maya tracked Venus with near-perfect accuracy. They understood that time wasn't just linear. It was alive, a sacred cycle. While we chase minutes, they honored eternity. And perhaps that's the lesson. In our age of fast answers, rapid growth, and instant data, the Maya remind us, real wisdom isn't loud. It's carved in silence, in temples that took decades to build, in glyphs written not just to record events, but to preserve meaning. They remind us that empires fall, but knowledge endures. That resilience isn't in concrete cities, it's in culture, in memory, in those who carry the fire forward. So the next time you look at the stars, ask yourself, are you watching them as a passerby? Or, like the Maya, as a participant in the grand rhythm of time? Their ruins may be still, but their legacy echoes, and it's calling us to listen.